Namaste everyone, I'm Roshan Karyappa and welcome to another episode of the Bharat Varta podcast. As India eases the lockdown and tries to get back to life as it was, it's infinitely clear now that there's been a fundamental shift. In this new normal, as people have been calling it, what are the new opportunities that Indian entrepreneurs can leverage to create wealth and lead the nation to progress? That's what we will be discussing on the podcast today. Joining me in this discussion, we have a very interesting lineup of guests. Uh, we have Amit Aranjpe, who is a tech entrepreneur based in Pune. Amit is a co-founder of ReliScore, a skill assessment startup, and also runs Pune Tech, which is a key contributor to the tech and startup ecosystem in Pune. Welcome, Amit.
Hi, Gary.
Next, we have Anand Lunia, who is a general partner at India Quotient, a venture capital firm that invests in early stage startups. Anand's area of interest spans across fintech, edtech, healthcare, and consumer businesses. Glad to have you, Anand.
Thank you.
And finally, we have Srivatsa Subbana, who is a senior analytics and data science professional and has worked in startups like MuSigma and Math Company. Currently, he heads the data science and business analytics function at Maverick Systems. Glad to have you on board, Srivatsa.
Thanks, Roshan. Glad to be here.
All right, so let's begin with you, Amit. Now, before we dive into some of the opportunities that are there for the taking, what do you see as some of the key social and economic shifts that have happened in this new normal?
I think that's a long discussion point, but I'll try to cover some of the points that make sense, and I'm sure Anand and Srivatsa will add to that, right? I think this is something that has not been faced by the world for over 100 years. And in terms of the changes that it has brought up in terms of our working styles or what we do, there were so many things that we took for granted over the last many generations, 3 generations, especially after the Second World War in the developed world, that we have almost done away with. Restaurants, travel, think of all the things that were considered so normal, and we are not doing that. So that has had profound economic impact, and that has had significant social impact as well, right? In terms of, one is just the working from home issue, right? And there are many businesses and there are many work functions that can do it. And there are many good success stories there where companies, especially in the tech sector, have transitioned to doing that very well. Some good stories there. But in terms of the impact it has had on people, in terms of the time spent together, time spent at home, that's a whole different topic. And I think that is something that will also have to be considered, since you specifically mentioned the social angle, right? In terms of going forward, I think it's clear that these things may not get back to normal very quickly. So this is a point that has been repeated ad nauseum these days. This is the new normal, and this is something that we are gradually learning to live with. I don't think we'll ever learn to live with it fully, and hopefully we don't have to beyond a few months or years. But I think we are in that transition space, and whenever there's such a big transition that happens, it creates a huge set of challenges and opportunities, right? So a lot of the current businesses are facing huge challenges, and similarly, interesting opportunities like e-commerce, like the technology that we're using right now, which is telepresence, teleconference. A lot of opportunities have opened up in that area. And to go back to today's topic, that's exactly the key for today's startups as well. Whereas there are a lot of markets that may go away for the short term, or some maybe even perpetually. A lot of interesting things have come up around the horizon, and let's discuss that in today's session.
Right. Yeah. So Anand, I want to come to you on that. It's said that there are opportunities for the taking in any market, and good entrepreneurs can be born anytime, right? We've seen in the last crisis as well, 2007, 2008, there were plenty of companies I can think of like Slack, MongoDB, Nutanix, etc., that were founded that time. What are some of the opportunities you see that are acutely possible in this circumstance that we're living in?
Right. So, okay. I mean, in general, of course, there are positives, obvious ones, which are like, a lot of software will be bought by Indian businesses, right? I mean, while startups reasonably seamlessly shifted to work from home, most companies didn't know where is what, right? Because they were not on the cloud, they didn't have the infrastructure, processes, etc., etc. Even small businesses, right? We are seeing some of our companies which are doing small business software, they are seeing significant adoption throughout the corona period, because these people are now realizing, dude, I need to be efficient. If I can buy things, and these are people probably becoming more regular e-commerce buyers. They were probably earlier occasional e-commerce buyers. A guy who can use e-commerce websites, there's no reason they can't use software for managing their own business also, right? So these people are going to adopt software. Education has been like a big revelation. People are reading. Most importantly, schools have adopted, right? I mean, parents are always keen to experiment, but schools have actually formally endorsed. And schools were the ones who were resisting technology solutions. But for them to collect their own fees, right? I mean, they are conducting Zoom lessons. I mean, that's the only way. If you don't do anything, you don't have a right to charge fees also, right? So that's the second one. A third area would be, in general, e-commerce. I think the number of e-commerce buyers has increased significantly. Total number of buyers, and at least for a year or two, the pressure on advertising costs and cost of acquisition, etc., they'll not be that high. So we think it's a good window of opportunity right now to create consumer startups. Globally, startups like Zoom have proven that work from home is a big culture. So the point is that if work from home is a big culture, it's a very interesting trend which is coming out. So there are a lot of companies which are trying to train people on coding for Indian startup jobs and Indian tech jobs, right? Income share agreement kind of companies. My point is that why should all the Indian engineers work for Indian companies now at all? Right? The best coders in India should be a part of work from home movement of, because if you're working from home, I mean, apart from a little bit of a time zone inconvenience, and even in US, there's no pure overlap between the two coasts. There's like a 3-4 hour of gap, right? If that is going to happen, then work from home will extend to absorb a lot of good quality techies from India. Right? It'll be good for the people, individuals, good for some of the startups who are in the mix, but in general, it might actually create a tech scarcity in India. Right? It'll be good to see, and good to see that technology talent is valued equally and flat all over the world. I think this could extend to some of the other professions also. Right? Including medicine, for example, right? I mean, radiology, etc. There's a lot of outsourcing already happening, but a lot of medical professions, a lot of finance professions, and those kind of things, analytics, science. I think all of these things will be a part of work from home, and the world which was not getting flat because of lack of visas and all, suddenly, how are you going to stop this, right? So this is a big movement. I don't want to speculate on what's going to happen in terms of companies, right? But this is a very important trend, right? As a VC, I just focus on trends. I don't focus on businesses. That's the job of the entrepreneur. In terms of other trends, I think I feel there's one trend, right? It's on the cost side. Most startups have decided not to burn. People have like, okay, why are we running so many multiple things here? Swiggy suddenly said, okay, my God, we are running too many experiments. Zomato said, why are we doing grocery? We already acquired Grofers, so we're going to shut down grocery. Swiggy said we'll shut down the cloud kitchens. If these kind of things are happening, then I think, if all startups stop burning, right, it will probably be very good for the entire ecosystem. The country can take a Zomato and Swiggy, and I don't see a reason for them to fight with each other. I mean, of course, there's an elephant in the room in terms of Amazon food also. But Ola and Uber again probably will realize that they should probably go to the back room and shake hands and fix the prices like Coca-Cola and Pepsi. Those kind of things will happen and might be a positive for the ecosystem as a whole.
Right. So before we, unravel some of the trends within domains and industries, I want to pick up on a couple of things that you mentioned, right? Which is the whole move to the cloud, the talent being democratized, and so on. Right? Do you see business models itself kind of changing because of this?
That's for me, Roshan?
Yeah, that's for you.
Okay. So Yeah, I mean, business models will become tighter for sure, right? A lot of flab will be shed from the business model itself.
Right.
Segment creep, which was happening. So, for example, I'll give an example, right? I mean, restaurant food is in India very clearly is for celebration. The restaurant food is not supposed to replace the dabba or your homemade lunch, right? It is not supposed. It can't support. I mean, like the IT worker in Bangalore or Pune who earns 25,000-30,000 rupees take home pay per month. That's the average salary, right? They can't afford a guy who earns more than them to be delivering food to them. It's just not possible. It just doesn't work, right? you know, you can't spend 60 rupee delivery cost for your afternoon lunch, right? I mean, you don't have the luxury. So all of those models. So I think I still can't imagine why a guy with that much of salary can afford a restaurant lunch every day. Probably he won't without the discounts and subsidies. And then we'll face the same problem again of who's going to feed people, right? So some of these business models which were becoming full stack, right, where Swiggy said, oh, there is not enough cheap food available, so we go full stack. Oyo said, oh, you want to corner a hotel and just ensure that they're logged in, let us guarantee a income to them, right? Swiggy said we'll open our own kitchens, right? So all of these models we were going full stack, where Udaan will have its own warehouses, Flipkart and Amazon will have their own warehouses, no third-party logistics. On the contrary, if you look at a traditional business model like Hindustan Lever, now Hindustan Lever is a very unique company, right? All they do is product development and branding and marketing. That's all they do, right? The warehouses are a third party, the manufacturers are a third party, the distributors are a third party, the retailers are of course third party, right? And that a company like that will emerge out of this very, very easy, right? And you think that a startup would have a lean business model to tackle special India challenges of lack of supply and lack of infrastructure. A Flipkart has their own logistics company, for example, right? And what they're doing for the last 3 months, twiddling their thumbs, right? Swiggy has a large delivery force, right? So I think business models will become leaner, right? This model will become more hands-free, third-party dependent, and all of that.
Yeah.
Even if it is a little painful, right? And that will be the one big change in the overall business model template.
Very interesting. Yeah, I mean, one thing that I noticed is like, when demand was high, it was okay to, own that inventory, have that full stack of services and everything. But, as scarcity sort of builds up, I mean, it'll again, unbundle and these things might again be distributed, right? So, Srivatsa, I want to come to you next and talk about few of these technology trends, right? I mean, we've seen that, the crisis has acted as a forcing function for some of the trends that have already been in play, whether it's like, virtual conferencing and stuff like that. How do you see this playing out going in the future, right? So will we see a lot more development of these, can I say indigenous technologies in India for these things?
Sure, Roshan. So before I start, I think there's one thing I would want to point out, and that is that because of our strong IT services industry, we've had a pretty good setup in terms of people picking up new technologies, applying them on business problems, whether it's to build products or accelerators, or whether it is to solve customer problems. So even if you look at some of the newer technologies, when I say new, they have been around. We've been hearing about AI, ML, and all for a few years now. They have been implemented even in India, right? So you have chatbots. Banks have chatbots. There are NBFCs that have created phenomenal databases of their own for smaller cities because that's where they operate, right? And they've not only just developed that, built that database up, but they've also built in strong capabilities on, whether it's data analytics or ML, and they're actually able to like offer loans to customers very quickly. They're able to build very good cross sell models. So some of these technologies, they're not really buzzwords. They're actually out there today, right? Another thing that has happened is with this whole democratization of knowledge. So the ability to be able to pick up some of these technologies and learn is not restricted to a few people. People can pick up courses online. They can go to Kaggle, pick up data sets, take part in hackathons, and build sort of their own profiles and learn these technologies themselves. There's one more interesting trend that's kind of happened because of in this ML space. There are some companies, small companies that operate in like tier 3 cities. I spoke to one of them when I was in my previous organization. What they do is they end up labeling a lot of data. So it may sound pretty low and BPO kind of work, but label data is a big input for running ML algorithms. A lot of times algorithms don't generate the right results because you don't have enough data to work with. uh, Having said all of this, we are good when it comes to applying technology. We're still not there when it comes to for instance, building say a new algorithm for image recognition or cognitive computing. We're not there. For that, I think one of the reasons that I can think of is that we don't have a very strong tie-up between industry and academia in India as it's there in the West.
Right, right. I mean, that's definitely interesting perspective in terms of how these technologies will play out, right? Amit, I want to pick up on edtech with you because that's something that has been like booming like crazy in this period, right? We've all heard that Unacademy did more revenues in April than the last 3 years combined, right? Uh, how do you see this affecting traditional models of schools and college education as such?
I think this is one sector that's going to have significant changes. And let's look at two different segments. I think the school as well as the college universities, right? In schools, clearly we have seen pretty much everywhere, right, that lessons are going online and various kinds of technologies are already being used. And there's some interesting work that has happened in India already. I've seen some Pune schools that have already built some interesting content and systems, and they're sharing it with other schools and other educational institutes as well. So this is an area where a lot of disruption has happened, and it will continue to happen. There is a great opportunity for edtech startups to provide solutions in the area of obviously in terms of streaming, but that's where pretty much standard off the shelf products like the one we are using will be used. But in relation to course management, content management, communication platform for parents and students, a lot of work is involved in that area, right? If when you come to colleges, it gets even more interesting, right? And let's look at it even from a US standpoint. One of the biggest reasons why the US universities, even though their fees have increased so well, where sort of I'll almost say surviving, is because of foreign students, right? And huge number of, especially in the last decade, Chinese and Indian and other Asian students have almost been uh, sort of subsidizing those students to some extent because they pay high state tuition fees, right? And as it is from last year with the US-China trade war, there was some drop in students, and now it's going to get even more difficult. So I think the US universities, and that's true for some of the other international universities as well, will have to figure out in this environment how do they reach out to online and go to countries all over the world, right? Now, the issue is pure online also has some restrictions. So in fact, just on a webinar 2 days back, we were having this discussion, and people were suggesting that some interesting hybrid models may come up. So for example, sitting here in Pune, if someone wants to do a course or a degree with, say, Berkeley, right? They can do it online, but it's no substitute for an actual in-person project or an actual experiment or an actual lab, right? So some of that can happen with a tie-up with a good local engineering college here in Pune. So they could actually use the facilities, the physical facilities of a local engineering college here in Pune while working on an international program. So those kind of hybrid models will work out. But just as Anand was saying some time back, from work anywhere, person sitting here in India could work for any international company. Same thing will definitely happen with education, right? I mean, there is visa regime will again not be a constraint, just as you said, for work, right? No need to worry about that. So I think that is going to be a very interesting opportunity. India, from a policy standpoint, has also had issues in the past in terms of letting foreign universities in. Now, this is again going to be a disruption for that, and the government and the authorities will also have to look at it in a completely different perspective again. So, both for schools and colleges, I think it's a great opportunity for the actual students as well as for startups to do something interesting to facilitate any of these workflows.
Right. So what do you think? I mean, do you think the schools and colleges will adapt technology sooner, or do you think the edtech guys will, become the equivalent of the schools and colleges?
I think it'll be a combination. It's difficult, and I think Anand has a lot greater experience in these kind of business model changes. But I think it will be a combination, right? I think there'll be some very good schools, both small and big chains of schools that are already in here, which may be able to adapt and will or could surprise you in terms of their adaptability. We have some small examples around here in Pune that I have seen. But on the other hand, the edtech companies obviously already have a big head start in terms of technology and in terms of the online model. I think we will end up seeing some kind of partnerships at various levels, because I think as much as we see, forget the education space, but even in the workspace, right? As much as companies like Twitter and Google and Facebook are saying that, you can work from home for a year, or Twitter is saying you can work from home forever, I think that's probably stretching things a little too far. I liked Microsoft, or specifically Satya Nadella's take on it. About a week back, he had published a blog. I tweeted about it a few times, where he said that, he doesn't see Microsoft going full-fledged to the other extreme. He's saying a balance is required. So some amount of office work for the interaction, for the meetings, for networking. He's framed it nicely. He said it's a mental health issue as well. And when we say it's a mental health issue, even at a senior level or senior professional level, or for a professional level who's already working adult level, right? I think it's an even bigger issue for students or for kids, for younger kids, for high school kids. I think we can't completely get away with no physical, in-person interactions, project work, and that kind of stuff. So I think that hybrid model will be necessary even for schools, and that's where the edtech players will have to partner with local schools to provide that platform.
Yeah, no, bound to happen. Because you don't just send your children to school to learn, right? To also socialize and pick up those skills as well, which are important. Anand, anything to add to what Amit?
I'll say that the disruption will come also because of consumer pressure, right? And what Amit was alluding to earlier. So what's happening is that there are 3 taxes the Indian middle class student pays, okay? Middle class youngster pays, right? So if you look at it, because of these 3 taxes, and the last of them is the income tax, which is probably not even relevant because these kids don't earn. But if you look at this IT boom and the demographic boom that we are supposed to have had, right? If you look at these people, their parents who were probably doing clerical jobs or bank jobs and teaching jobs. They were staying in a 2-bedroom apartment right in the heart of the city, right? They did not have a lot of borrowings, and they actually ended up saving a lot of money for their retirement, right? Whereas the demographic boom of India has been taxed 3 times, right? The first one is the education tax, which is basically people end up going to expensive private schools, expensive higher education, including stupid MBAs and all of that, right? And the employment they get just doesn't justify at all, right? Even it's actually difficult to justify anything outside IIMs and let's say ISB or those kind of things, because there are no salaries, right? Not at all. You spend 15-20 lakhs on an engineering degree, and then you go for an MBA and you again go and work for a TCS in a 4 lakh rupee job, right? So it's very difficult. That's one tax, and that the tax is because, like Amit said, in India, competition, whether private or foreign competition in education, is not allowed at all, right? The education has made a social tax. The second thing is real estate, right? Similar tax, right? I think complete lobby, mafia kind of control on real estate prices, etc., has made the whole thing untenable. So I'll just give an example. In India, education, for example, we spend far more, right? An education degree typically costs you 4 to 5 years of median income, which in US probably will not be that high. Normal degree, right? I mean, Ivy League degrees are expensive there also, but even there, Ivy League degree is probably 1-2 years of salary. Okay, in India, an apartment in Bangalore or Bombay or Delhi or Hyderabad or Pune is typically 10 to 20 times of salary. If you go to America, suburban America, a much larger house, right? When I'm comparing a 2-bedroom here to, let's say, a 3-bedroom, 1,700 square feet house in suburban America, that house is at the most 4 to 5 times of median income, right? Median income would be like $50,000, right? If you take the median income at 5 lakh rupees here, you would probably be spending 20 months of money in Bangalore to get a decent 2-bedroom apartment, right? Maybe 15 months of money in some place.
And no difference between urban or suburban also in Bangalore.
Absolutely, no difference. I mean, it feels urban all the way. Like you travel 1 hour and you're still in dense jungle, right? And I'm not talking about the physical effect it has on your life, right? So I think these taxes are the ones which are killing. Yeah. And I think in a crisis like this, when 20% of your colleagues are going to lose their jobs and everybody's taken a salary cut, people are going to wake up and say, do I need to spend these kind of things, right? And they'll reform education, they'll reform real estate, they'll probably also reform savings, right? Stock market has come back, and people now realize that they are smart enough in saving money in stock markets rather than saving money in real estate.
Right.
I am hoping that this will be a good time. The government is trying to correct real estate prices, but education, the government is not trying to correct, right? I mean, somehow I think education remains the last holy cow to be touched. Right. And I don't know, but Amit is right. I think when a sector becomes so political that it refuses to change and the government protects it so much, right? Yeah. Then it is attacked from outside and other forces take over. So probably we'll have much cheaper, better foreign degrees entering into Indian higher education, right? And all of this become irrelevant.
Yeah, I think the other thing I'll quickly add here, I think one of the big problems with India going back to probably the British era is this fascination with degrees, right?
Yeah.
It's never been a problem. It's not as much as a problem. I mean, obviously there's Ivy Leagues and all, but otherwise in US and especially in Europe, skills are more important. Degrees are not important. Right?
Amit, you're right. I'll just tell you an example. I'll not name the big tech company. We have this income share agreement school. Okay.
Yeah.
And
Lambda school.
Masai, like Lambda school.
Like Lambda school. Okay.
Yeah, a Lambda school equivalent, called Masai. Masai people went to a large IT company and said, dude, you are giving 6.5-7 lakh rupees to IT and top NIT students, right? My students can code better, but they will not join you for 3.5 lakh rupees because you will say that you are a BSc or a 3-tier engineering college. If you want to pay us 7 lakh rupees, 8 lakh rupees, our students will come and join you, right? And against their long-standing 20-year-old HR policy, this IT major said, yes, we are open. Right?
I think that will happen a lot.
And if that happens suddenly, why do people need a degree, right? I mean, the degree was the path to a job. People are smart enough, right? I think the social value of the degree will eventually go away if large companies stop paying attention to the degree.
And I think that will happen in IT much quicker because, IT anyway, it's sort of a skill-oriented, vocation-oriented job, but it needs to happen in all sectors in India. I think the fascination of a typical BA, BCom, BSc degree needs to go away. Rather, instead, if they do specific vocational courses, which are either for
apprenticeships and stuff like
or
that,
for actual skills, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Which is how it's quite common in Europe, for example. That will go a long way.
Yeah, absolutely.
That disruption should also happen where we have very specific skills-oriented courses as opposed to degrees.
I can see what Amit is batting for. The politicians of Maharashtra are not going to like you, Amit.
Everywhere, I guess.
Yeah, everywhere.
There are some institutions that are actually moving towards that. So, for example, a good compromise here is there are institutions that are talking about a B vocational degree. Right. So if it's like this, right? If you're that fascinated about degree, fine, I'll give you a degree. But it's really the vocational skills that you're learning. So you can call it whatever you want. But see, if I am a B vocational in plumbing, that is much better skill to learn than doing a 3-year arts program and then getting into something which is completely irrelevant. That specific learning.
So Roshan, what I wanted to say was that, we talked about startups being flexible, startups being lean, and not having debt and not having expenses. I think consumers will have to do the same thing, right? I mean, as a
Really
youngster,
question the value of everything, right?
yeah, as a youngster, you don't want to be tied up with a large EMI
Yeah.
for your education loan or for your home purchase, right?
Yeah.
If the times are going to be turbulent, you are better off saving for the future and running lean, right? Not having a lot of liabilities. Right?
Yeah.
And that is a lesson where people will learn from these kind of things, these kind of major events.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, Vatsa, I want to come to you and talk about fintech. Now, just as, the schools and colleges will have to, play with edtech players, the large financial services guys will obviously have to play with, some of the startups as well, right? So how do you see that partnership working out, the APIs, distribution, services, and so on? So how do you see that panning out?
Okay, so frankly speaking, I don't think banks today have a choice but to tie up with fintechs for 2 or 3 reasons. I'll talk about them. Uh, first thing is, when you look at things like compliance or KYC, on the banking side, uh, regulators seem to be more flexible than banks themselves. I'll just give you an example. It's been a few months since RBI has allowed remote KYC.
Video KYC.
Where through a video and using your Aadhaar card or PAN card or whatever, your KYC can be done remotely and your account can be opened remotely. If you look at the number of banks that today actually offer it's actually quite low, right? And a lot of times banks like to blame regulators, but here the regulator has kind of let banks go down this route. There like that, there are a lot of silly rules that banks have. For instance, if you need to change the bank account of your EMI, you need to go to the branch. If you need to get address change done, some banks still require you to come down there with original documents. A lot of this will go away, and as this goes away, a lot of the tech that will come in to enable some of these transactions to go digital, to improve customer experience, just by being digital, will come from fintechs and startups, right? A bank will not do innovate. Similarly, there are a lot of fintech companies, companies like Cabbage, for instance, who have built fantastic credit scoring models, where you can decide whether to give a person a loan in less than 10 minutes. But if you were to go to a typical old-fashioned NBFC, it would probably take a few days, and they'll ask you to come multiple times with documents and so on. So some of these steps have actually happened and they've worked quite well outside India. I gave the example of Cabbage. So ING tied up with Cabbage and was able to offer small business loans, so up to around 100k euros in Europe in less than 10 minutes, right? So they didn't have the technology. They partnered with a fintech, and they were able to do this, right? Similar thing happened with Chase. Although Chase's agreement with OnDeck has ended, it was a 3-year agreement, and they used OnDeck's underwriting tech for two things. One is they used it to disburse the loan, and also OnDeck acted as a servicer, so it got them a steady source of income. So these are like some examples, but in general, I think banks with their huge IT costs, lot of legacy tech, they will struggle to make the move, and they will need good fintechs to partner with them, and that's where I see this going.
Right. Anand, you've invested in a bunch of cutting edge fintechs as well, right? LendingKart, CreditMate, and a bunch of them. What is your outlook on the fintech space?
See, I think in the fintech space, RBI has to take a call, right? I mean, probably they've taken a call already, looks like, right? Whether they want anybody apart from banks to survive or not. Looks like they've decided nobody else should survive, right? I mean, if you look at the way they've denied moratoriums to the NBFC specifically, right? And which is very surprising, because at the same time, the government keeps saying that NBFCs are very important, and that's the only way you can get borrow a loan and blah blah blah. Banks are by and large very urban, only premium salaried account kind of a phenomena, right? So and I think it's a decision that will be taken from there, right? And I think this crisis specifically, right, has made the future murky for any non-banking entity in the ecosystem. Right? It's sad. It shouldn't have been that way. It should have been actually, if nothing else, it should have been neutral, right? But it has been negative, right? It's like almost like systematically disenfranchising any other form of business in the market. I think this, along with the fact that a banking license is like almost not there at all. The government has not given any banking licenses. So by and large, fintech is being determined, the future of fintech is being determined by a very small oligopoly. If I put a gun to your head, Roshan, you will probably name 5 or 10 banks, right? And not more than 10, right? You'll struggle to go beyond double digits, right? That's the number of banks we have. 90% market share is taken care of by State Bank of India, ICICI, HDFC, and Axis Bank, right? That's the number. That's the oligopoly. RBI is the frontal body of the oligopoly. I wish it was a regulator. I wish it wanted to be deeper, right? They are taking some positive steps, but by and large, I think the RBI as a regulator of banking system and a progressive regulator has not really done a great job.
Right.
Very disappointed. RBI's other role of interest rate management and all is different, right? And I wish that we had a separate financial system regulatory body and not really clubbed with the RBI, because it's just not working. It's not relaxing enough. Our financial system is not deep at all. We are going from one crisis to the other crisis. And frankly, in the financial system, the biggest crisis is not Corona, by the way, right? I mean, Corona crisis is difficult, but then we've been like, so many banks collapsing. And I think the complete lack of trust in the entire system, right? I mean, you can't say that RBI did not have a role in, if at least of lack of oversight in what happened in PMC Bank and then Yes Bank, and now you don't know which bank is kosher, right? I mean, we're all supposed to put our money in State Bank of India, right? And hope like hell that the government will not shy from bailing that out, right? I mean, just before the Corona crisis happened, a lot of our startups had actually their money stuck with Yes Bank.
Yeah.
Deposit money.
The highest number of UPI transactions also.
Yeah, just imagine. I mean, we thankfully got saved, right? And some of the other bank account holders of PMC Bank and others did not really have that, right? And the thing is that we are not really seeing corrective steps coming from RBI, right? And this loss of trust and lack of lending ability, is going to be debilitating the whole country, right? So something has to happen, but so far it's negative, and so far, hence I remain, although I'm heavily invested, Roshan, I unfortunately remain negative on the prospects of fintech companies.
Okay. Amit, you have anything to add on that?
No, I think two experts have already talked about it, so I'll pass on this one.
Sure. Okay, one sector that is hard to ignore as well as healthcare, because there's just been so much of action right now. And if you look at healthcare in India, there's just such a huge scope for improvement, right? From infrastructure, say things like hospital beds and stuff like that, to even our diagnostics and patient care and things to that effect. So Amit, I mean, what do you see as new opportunities for entrepreneurs in healthcare as such?
I think clearly that's going to be one of the biggest sectors coming out, right, in the near future. I think at least this generation is going to live with the memories of 2020. So healthcare will be at the back of everyone's mind. I think it's important to break it up into 2-3 subcomponents, right? Healthcare and pharma, right? So if you look at pharma, there are obviously going to be interesting opportunities in drug discovery, both small molecules, large molecules. We haven't had as many startups working in that area as you see in the US and Europe. I think that's a sector that can become potentially active. We have some good colleges and research institutions in the country that is doing some interesting work. So that is a sector which is going to see some activity and funding. And I think it's an opportunity for PhDs coming out of some of the top ICERs, IISCs, and some of the CSIR labs to think of working in that area, right? So that's in terms of the drug discovery side. In terms of healthcare, absolutely. I think all kinds of opportunities exist, whether it's diagnostics, whether it's hospitals, whether it's specific equipment. There was this big, I would almost say, a bubble of sorts, but I think it's a right bubble for building low-cost ventilators, right? I think 3 months back, everyone, including the developer, thought that we're going to need a large number of ventilators and we're going to be short. Now things look a little bit different, and I think not necessarily bad that we reacted in the way we did all over the world in terms of creating low-cost ventilators. But I think something like that is going to be key. A lot of, I won't say low cost, but appropriate cost equipment. I think PPEs are great examples, right? There are some mostly, I mean, India from practically producing nowhere is now the second biggest producer. And even there, while we have some big companies, there are many small, we traditionally don't call them startups because they are not tech, but they're essentially SMEs. Many small SMEs have pivoted quite well and are producing excellent quality of PPEs. There are dozens of them, probably hundreds of them all over India. So I think there are opportunities absolutely everywhere. One thing that we talk about, which is sort of obvious to everyone, is telehealth, and I think that's been talked about as a buzzword for, I have heard it for at least 20 years now. But I think this is the disruption that's finally going to make it stay for long and be sort of the standard interaction format. Because what has been proven is there are many interactions with the doctor that don't need in-person meeting. And we have proven to ourselves all over the world over the past 3 months that, a doctor visit is not really the first course of action, which is how we've sort of grown with over the last, many generations. So I think interesting opportunities in telehealth. See, traditionally people have looked at telehealth as just some kind of a video conferencing tool and some kind of an EMR, right? Electronic medical record. I think it needs to be much more than that in terms of managing the workflows, in terms of managing the interaction, in terms of doing some bot-based diagnostics, some intelligent, what Shrivas was talking about, right? The AI bots to do some initial triage. I think there's a lot of interesting opportunities in that area. I'll almost call it the next level telehealth. And I think that is a great opportunity for startups who are working in AI, who are working in enterprise software to look at it. So I'll pause there, but it's a long conversation. It's just every area you think of in healthcare and pharma is ripe with opportunities.
Yeah, there's just a heck of a lot of room for improvement, right? I mean, from all aspects, if you look at it, one thing I'm personally excited about is like, the whole consumerization of healthcare that could happen where, people want more control. They don't really want to go to doctors, as you said, want to visit hospitals and facilities for interventions, rather, take as much care of themselves at home itself, right? So what do you see as some opportunities, in some other sectors as well? I mean, we've spoken about edtech, fintech and healthcare. I mean, of course, these are like three really large ones. But of course, I mean, there could be other opportunities as well, right?
Right. So I can think of one or two. One trend I think which will accelerate. It's been there for a while, but I think it will accelerate is the use of AR in retail. Right. So augmented reality. You have some examples in India, like Lenskart lets you try out glasses online, and they tell you how it fits and so on. But I think there's a larger sort of opportunity in retail. AR is used in visualization. So instead of going through a typical e-commerce site where let's say I'm looking to buy, say, from Amazon Fresh or Big Basket, and I see a sort of a laundry list of items available. If I'm looking for vegetables, instead of that, if it were a more visual experience, I think a lot of people will adopt it faster. That's, I think, one trend. And I was reading some research on that, where AR, so e-commerce sites that had AR were 19% more effective than normal sites. So it's a definite opportunity out there. Another one I can think of and it's kind of really vague at this stage in my head, is that it ties back to a conversation we had a few days ago, which is trying to pack more into life, right? So I think as we come out of this, there will be a set of people who will value life experiences a lot more. And I think with the amount of data that we have about people, their behaviors, for instance, if someone likes to go out on drives, where do they go out for drives? All of this information is available. It may not be available at one place, but it is definitely available. So there are opportunities, I think, for startups who are looking to enter this space to kind of curate life experiences for people, build communities, and once they gather more data and information about their customers, they can curate newer experiences for their customers.
Right.
It's still right now at a very vague thought, but I think there will be companies that will definitely come up in this area.
Yeah. No, I mean, if you look at travel and retail, for example, literally decades worth of wealth has vanished overnight, right? So I don't know, $1 trillion+ have just vanished overnight. And that whole process of recreating that wealth is bound to throw up plenty of opportunities.
This travel thing, I wanted to add one thing.
Yeah, sure.
Was that if people are going to work from home, right?
Yeah.
And that itself mean less social interaction, right?
Yeah.
So I think that people will seek more travel, right? In fact, it makes it easier to travel because you now don't need to take a holiday or
Good point.
leave from office to travel, right? And people love traveling, and the biggest hindrance has not been necessarily just cash. It's also that you don't get leave, right?
Yes.
So
Right.
I think we're going to see like groups of teams of people taking joint vacation and working on vacation. Maybe
Think of this, right? Work from Goa.
Yeah,
work from Goa would be like the ultimate.
Yeah, companies might even sponsor them, right? Okay, why don't you guys go and work from Goa for a month, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, we're saving on rent in Bangalore,
Right.
so let's work from Goa for a month, right? So I think, and people need social interaction, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
You can't really be hold at home and not take holidays also. It won't work that way. See,
Yeah.
I think if anything, people are going to spend less on things like real estate and less on things like education, the big ticket items,
Right.
and they are going to enjoy the present, right?
Yeah.
People are going to save less, right? So I think that's going to be, it's going to be the opposite of what we think it will be, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, they'll have to spend somewhere, and I think a lot of these experiential things might become lot
next
more.
time I get a chance for a holiday, I'm not waiting. Seriously.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Anand, I also wanted to ask you about the whole funding scene as well, right? So VC funds in India, I think they raised around 2.1 billion in 2019, right? So given the possibilities and the new opportunities for innovation, do you see more money coming into India, like venture capital money?
Yeah, it will. Money will come. Money has already been coming, right? I mean, as we speak, 2 of my companies raised money, including term sheets happening after March, right? It's April, May. People wired money after lockdowns happened, right? So one people are still interested in deals. Of course, they're looking for cheaper deals and better deals. They did wait. So, people waited for what the crisis impact will be. But if you look at, what's happening in US, and which is our biggest source of money, right? So China FDI restriction is a negative, definitely. I hope there's some solution found to that.
Mm-hmm.
But the US, which is the biggest source of money into India, they're printing money. They're printing tons of money, right?
Right.
And all of these VC funds have actually done quite well, in spite of whatever. I mean, if you look at what's happening, look at Byju's, look at Unacademy, there are these companies which are continue to do well. Geo has raised probably 3 years of venture capital put together, right? I mean, so and that's actually a private equity deal, by the way. It's not a public markets deal. It's a deal in a private company and comes from PE funds, right? You would expect Facebook to fund Indian startups, and they already funded the biggest startup there, right? So
exactly. Yeah.
So a ton of money is going to come. I also feel that in general, after this corona crisis, the overall the scale is tilting in the favor of startups, right? I mean, people are going to use more e-commerce, more online education, more software, and all of that.
Right.
So in general, I think after a pause, the pause might be, because of bad job losses and bad economy and all that, the
Right.
value will be subdued. But 2021, I think, will be back with a bang.
Right. Right.
And we'll see even more valuations in most of the companies we thought will die. They will be valued higher. By the way, I'll just give an example. One of the companies I am involved with, they raised like a large sum of money at double the valuation that they raised 6 months ago. Okay, and this is not a tech company. This is not a tech company. This is a company which suffered because of Corona. Okay,
Wow.
and yet this happened, right? And it is a surprising part, right? Because there is enough money and people are not that worried about. So by the way, everybody says it will be a matter of time that the vaccine will come, right? Or a matter of time the vaccine the virus becoming weak, right?
Right.
So yes, temporary problem. We lost a year, but that's about it. We just lost a year, right?
Right. And the capital will have to be deployed somewhere.
Yeah, the market is great and the market will come back, right?
Yeah.
If our government does a few things better, it will become even better, right? I mean, the tax officials have been scaring all the investors away, and I still think that in spite of the government, the market will come back and the venture capital will come back.
Sure. Actually, I was going to ask you that, which is that, what can government do to kind of spur this innovation and whatever?
The government is better off not doing anything.
Get out of the way?
They should do very little. So I'll just give you an example, right? I mean, you guys are a part of the media. Somebody should go and ask about what happened to all the incubators and all of that, right? I mean, I don't think anything significant came out of it. The government needs to enable private players, right? And the best way of enabling private players is, one, to have clear regulations. Suddenly you can't stop China FDI. You can't be chasing people 3 years after they take an exit for taxation, right? They played as per the rules. You don't like malicious companies, you stop malicious companies. That's a separate thing. But once if somebody took advantage of that, post facto you can't say you. Of course, I do a lot of things to save taxes, dude. I mean, we all go and buy an apartment to save taxes because it's allowed by the government of India, right? I think government needs to stop doing things, right? Have very clear regulations, most importantly, and if possible, and not the most important thing, if possible, reduce taxes, right? Capital gains taxes that people pay. But by and large, I think getting out of the way and having clear regulations, where the regulators are defensible, the government saying, no, we had a regulation, whatever the regulation was, we will ensure that it will be honored, right? And the courts honor the regulation, right? Faster justice system, very important. Enforcement of contracts, very important. I think these are basic things here. Frankly speaking, I think startups are not even asking for roads, right? I mean, most industries will say we want better roads. We don't even want better roads. We are okay with that. We just want clear regulation, right? And less governance. That's what we want.
Right. Okay, to end the podcast on any words of advice for startups and entrepreneurs who are listening. I mean, we could just do a round the table actually. Amit, any words of advice?
Let Anand go first. I think he's also in a rush. So.
I think Roshan, this is a great time to start a company. First of all, okay. Right. Funding is scarce, but funding is happening. This is the best time to get engineers you were not getting for years, right? There are companies that are struggling to hire and fill positions for 6 months, 12 months, and all of that. So best time to get people. Also, you don't have a social pressure of getting an office and all. You can work from home. So probably the cheapest time to get started. Also, the best time the consumers will give it a try. They have enough time. They'll try something new. And I have seen that, my first startup, and Amit and I were talking about startup in Pune, BrainVisa, was started at the fag end of the .com boom. We were caught in the bust and we were struggling, working out of top of an apartment for years, right? But when that's when you build the best companies, right? And that's when you find the best business models. Same thing happened in 2009-10 when Redbus and all survived somehow and did very well. Coming out of those, Carvale was there. All these startups did quite well. Flipkart itself went through a lot of hassle, and they had barely did the seed round. They after a gap of 2.5 years, they again raised in 2010 mid, right? So all of these companies were hardened, and this in retrospect will tell you that this is the best time to start.
Right. All right. It's been a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much, Anand. Thank you, Srivatsa. Thank you, Amit, for joining us. Right. I'm sure that plenty of people listening to this will have plenty of ideas as well to maybe build the next few companies that we'll talk about on the other podcast to come about.
Absolutely, looking forward to that.
Great.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Roshan.
Thanks.
Bye. Thanks everyone who tuned in to listen. The podcast will be live on all popular platforms like Anchor.fm, Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, and a bunch of other platforms. Do listen, subscribe, and share with your friends and family. Until next time, stay safe and Jai Hind.